So we're focusing on this slogan, defund the police, but where are the resources to bring jobs into our communities? Where are the resources to fully fund our public schools? Where are the resources to deal with the issue of housing and food insecurity?
After having his feed cut during a CNN appearance last week, Congressman-elect Jamaal Bowman is back on CNN. This time, informing the CNN audience about what defund the police means, and he does a fantastic job here.
Defund the police. It's bad messaging because it turns people off to the real reforms that you are trying to put forward. What is your response and your take on that? Do you think there's something to that?
Defund the police does not mean abolish the police. It means a dramatic reduction in the number of police in our poor communities, and particularly our poor Black and brown communities. Historically, when our communities have needed jobs, they didn't bring us jobs. They brought us police, and they created a system of mass incarceration. And we live in a country where if you're Black or brown, you're more likely to be killed by police and more likely to be incarcerated and more likely to not afford bail. So we're focusing on this slogan, defund the police, but where are the resources to bring jobs into our communities? Where are the resources to fully fund our public schools? Where are the resources to deal with the issue of housing and food insecurity? We're not talking about any of that. We're worried about a slogan. And lastly, only 5% of police work is focused on violent crimes, rape, homicide, aggravated assault. The other 95% can be handled by other agencies, mental health institutions, domestic violence professionals, etc. So we've been doing policing all wrong for decades. In some cities, 40% of the budget goes toward policing, and police are terrorizing Black and brown communities. The evidence is clear across the country. So we have to do something different and not allow Republicans to flip a talking point on its head and make us respond to it. This is about reimagining our country and building back better in a way that uplifts Black communities and not leaves them oppressed.
Well, I look forward to seeing the kind of legislation you put forward now that you are actually going to be a member of Congress, and how you're going to use your voice in the United States House of Representatives.
So first up here, I like that Jamaal Bowman brings up abolish the police, because that is the actual activist position. Abolish the police. Defund the police is the compromise. And all it means, as he discusses, is a reallocation of resources. This is what every lawmaker, this is how every lawmaker should be discussing defund the police. Instead of talking about the slogan and whether or not it works or not, just inform people about what it means, what this activist movement around it is about, why it exists. That's your job as a lawmaker isn't just to, pass bills, it's to inform people. You're a public figure. You have the position, you have the ability to inform people with your voice. This is the mistake that Barack Obama made as well. I covered this this week, where instead of coming out and informing people what defund the police means and why that movement exists, he just goes ahead and stifles the energy for that movement by criticizing the slogan. If you have a voice as big as Barack Obama, you should be embarrassed if you're not using it to inform people. Using it instead to hurt the Democratic base, hurt the energy that is around a policy that makes absolute sense once it's explained to people. Now, again, it's also about it's not even just about reimagining policing in terms of, using these resources that have been poured into police. I mean, as he discussed there, these budgets are crazy. You see police budgets ballooning while there's been cuts to everything else. But so it's not just about, replacing certain calls with mental health care professionals or domestic violence professionals, but it's also it's about actually looking at where the money's going. Why isn't there being more money poured into public housing or public health generally? So it's about actually looking at where the money is going and if it's helping. Clearly, pouring all of this money into policing while ignoring mental health, ignoring public housing, ignoring education is not working. So there has to be a different approach, and that's what the Defund the Police movement suggests. And it also, I've discussed this before, the reason why the slogan is actually great is because it moves the entire conversation to a position where anything to the right of defund the police all of a sudden sounds more reasonable. So if you tell someone, hey, we should defund the police, and they push back and think, oh, that sounds crazy, we're going to have no police anymore, you explain, no, police still exist for responding to violence or anything where it makes sense to have the police there. But then you explain all it is reallocating funds away from police. We've seen these police budgets balloon. It's reallocating those funds into other areas. And all of a sudden, that argument sounds more rational because they were freaked out that defund the police meant that you're abolishing police, when in reality, it never meant that. But the point being, it moves the entire conversation to a place where when you actually explain what defund the police means, people are more willing to accept that. And also, one last thing here. Why wasn't there a freak out when Paul Ryan was calling to defund Planned Parenthood? This language has been used by Republicans for years, not just in terms of Planned Parenthood, but for everything. Yet, did you see Republican lawmakers and former presidents like George Bush come out and say, you know what? It's too harsh. We shouldn't be saying defund Planned Parenthood. No, that language, it turns people off. We got to be more careful with how we discuss these issues. No, they just go for the jugular. Why is it that Democrats have to police their language, but Republicans never do? Again, any Democrat pushing back against defund the police is not your friend. They should be out there informing people about what it actually means and discussing why it makes sense.